Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. Our top focus today is on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's bilateral visit to France. Prime Minister Modi and French President Macron attended the Bastille Day parade in Paris. The parade saw the participation of a 269-member Indian Tri-Services contingent. 3 Rafale fighter jets of the Indian Air Force joined the flypast on the occasion along with French jets. The Prime Minister was also conferred with France's highest honor, the Grand Cross of the Legion of Honor, by French President Emmanuel Macron. Yesterday, while addressing the Indian diaspora, the Prime Minister said that both India and France have agreed on using UPI mechanism and that Indian tourists in France will now be able to use UPI soon from the Eiffel Tower. So how will the Prime Minister's visit to France boost trade and defense ties? Joining me now are Anil Wadhwa, former Secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs, and former Ambassador Ashok Sajjanhar. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Ambassador Wadhwa, let me begin by asking you, when it comes to India's partnership with the European Union, how critical is our partnership with France there? And when it comes to solidifying the partnership further, how critical will this meeting between President Macron and Prime Minister Modi play a role?
So France is an important player in the European Union. As far as India is concerned, this relationship is based in deep trust and commitment. And the two countries have been cooperating very closely, as we know, across various domains. And that is not just defense and space and the nuclear issues, but also increasingly it's been blue economy, in trade, in investment, in education, culture and people-to-people ties. And of course, France sees India now more and more as an important regional and global player. This relationship is certainly very strong. It's trusted, it's consistent, and it's been steady and resilient in difficult times like the nuclear tests which India conducted in 1998. It's also been very bold and ambitious, I would say, in looking for opportunities. And basically the strength of this relationship is in the shared vision that we have of international relations and the rule of law, in multilateralism and strategic autonomy. And I think France is also becoming a trusted partner for India now in the Indo-Pacific and is seen as a partner for the future.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanhar, when it comes to participation in the Indo-Pacific, tell us how the two countries would like to move forward. What would be President Macron's priority when it comes to Indo-Pacific?
I think basically France concurs with the position that has been put on the paper by the Quad countries that we want a free and open, secure, inclusive and prosperous Indo-Pacific. So I think its own paper on the Indo-Pacific that has been issued, it basically articulates these particular elements in terms of freedom of navigation, in terms of overflights, that as far as disputes are concerned, they should be discussed, they should be resolved through diplomacy and dialogue and not through coercion. So I think these are all elements that France shares with India. India had put out its own version of the Indo-Pacific when Prime Minister Modi spoke at the Shangri-La Summit in 2018, in June 2018. So there is a great deal of convergence. What makes France particularly special amongst the European countries as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned is, Parikshit, that it is also a resident power in this region, and it has a base in Djibouti, just at the mouth of the Indian Ocean. So it has a presence, it has significant presence, unlike many of the other countries in Europe. So here it is able to bring heft, it's able to bring strength, it's able to bring its assets into the picture, and in that sense it provides much greater traction and strength to whatever we are talking about as far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned. So it is an ideal partner to have, and particularly in the context of the Indian Ocean also, not only in the broader region of the Indo-Pacific, but particularly in the Indian Ocean, because you would have seen that as far as the Quad is concerned, the focus has been much on the South China Sea, on the East China Sea, on the Taiwan Straits, in terms of, the 9-dash line in the South China Sea by China. But here, France is a resident power in the Indian Ocean, so it, in terms of providing stability, security in this region, I think it can play a very significant, important role. Parikshit.
Right. Ambassador Wadhwa, when it comes to the G20, how important will our relationship with France and the Prime Minister's personal relationship with President Macron be to reach a consensus on the communique, which has literally eluded us so far? We've had no consensus, especially the wording on the Ukraine war.
I think, Parikshit, you've asked a very important question because, you know, as we know that amongst the European leaders, it is President Macron who's perhaps got a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the Ukraine conflict. And he is one of the important leaders in Europe who's already been in touch with President Putin. He's been trying from the very beginning to find a resolution to this conflict, something which India has also been trying, and Prime Minister Modi has also articulated on many occasions. So I think, you know, when Prime Minister Modi is in France, he would be trying to gauge from President Macron what his assessment is of Ukraine, what is actually happening there on the ground, and what is the way forward for the conflict to end as soon as possible. Now, India, as being a president of the G20, would definitely like a favorable outcome, an outcome document which is adopted by consensus, which seems very difficult at the moment, given the fact that we've not been able to reach any consensus in the foreign ministers' meeting, which was held under the G20 auspices. So it doesn't look so good at the moment. But going forward, I think when it comes to the crunch, countries would try that extra bit to find a consensus. And France is a very important interlocutor for India in that respect. And therefore, the exchange of views during this visit in particular, I would think would be very important.
Right. Ambassador Sajjanhar, coming to the issue of China, clearly we saw US investing a great deal in the defense partnership with India, in the economic partnership with India, from the Navy to the Air Force to semiconductors. Now when it comes to France, we see some big ticket defense items on the table. Do you think France would also like India to be an alternative to China, a counter to China in the region? A strong India in a defense manner is important for France too?
I think as far as France, its relations with China are concerned, I think they are much more nuanced than the relations of the United States with China. Because you would recall that when the French President Macron was in Beijing recently, along with the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, then his position was definitely much mellower than what the position that the Americans have taken. Because the Americans, you would recall, had started with the position of decoupling. Later they came on to de-risking of their relationship with China. While as far as Europe is concerned, France is concerned, it has been much softer in terms of how to deal with China. It has always taken the stand. In that sense, it's been somewhat of a loner, but it has very steadfastly safeguarded its strategic autonomy, saying that they should not become a satellite of the United States. Europe should have its own independent policy. So I think the two positions are quite different in terms of the collaboration with India. That has been going on, you know, whether it is the transfer of technology, it has been taking place right from the very beginning. France has been a very steadfast partner of India, whether you take defense, whether you take space. So I think there, in terms of the foundations, it goes back much further. It is much stronger and more on a bilateral basis rather than as a counter to China per se, I would say. Because here France sees the competition with China basically on the economic front, it doesn't really see China as a systemic threat as the United States views it. So the perspectives would be different, but in terms of, whether it is the transfer of technology by Safran or more of Rafale jets coming to India, the final objective would be the same, but I think the purpose would be quite different between the two. Parikshit.
All right. Ambassador Wadhwa, final question to you. How important are these defense deals, the Scorpion deal, the Rafale deal for the Indian Navy? How soon do you think the leaders will be able to conclude, and how soon would we be able to access these technologies?
So, Parikshit, we can expect, the announcements to be made during this visit, of course. And you rightly pointed out that the Rafale deal and the Scorpion deal are both on the table. But I think they would take some time before the joint working groups can work out the nitty-gritty and the details of pricing, technology transfer, the terms, etc. So we're looking at, somewhere in the future, not immediate future, but maybe, a couple of years down the line till everything is completed, when we can look back and say, well, this decision has now been implemented. But more important than that is the possibility that, India would be given the technology transfer for the helicopter engines, which we have been, of course, working in collaboration with France for some time now. But that would give a big fillip to the industry in India itself. And again, another important aspect of this is the technology transfer for the medium combat aircraft, which is a futuristic aircraft, a stealth aircraft. And if the engines are going to be co-produced and co-designed and then co-certified in India, then of course it would give a bigger boost to the Indian aerospace industry. And that's what, it seems to be important.
I think run out of time. Right. Ambassador Wadhwa, those are very important points. Unfortunately, I've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you and Ambassador Sajjanhar for joining us, giving us your view on the big defense deals and the larger importance of India and France coming together in Paris this week. We're going to take a short break, but coming up on the other side, India's UPI flies into France, expanding its global footprint. Indian tourists in France will be able to make payments in rupees. A special discussion with Ritesh Shukla, CEO at NPCI International Payments, on what this means for India. Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. India and France have agreed on the usage of the Unified Payment Interface System, or the UPI. Yes, UPI will go live from the Eiffel Tower, and Indian tourists will be able to make payments there using UPI. To talk about this, we're joined by the CEO of International Operations of NPCI, Ritesh Shukla. Ritesh, thank you very much for joining us. Tell us first about your partnership with Lyra of France. Is this a purely commercial agreement between two corporations, or is it a G2G, government-to-government arrangement?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this important, partnership that we are looking at with Lyra. Indians are a big traveler to different European, countries for tourism, business and academic purposes. And I think France, being one of the big economies there, significantly featured in the list. Through this partnership with Lyra, we are looking at enabling acceptance of UPI-powered apps from India. This would deliver a great deal of convenience for travelers from India. They will be able to use the QR codes that are deployed in that market and make their merchant payments. So very, very important use case that we are looking at catering to this partnership. And the arrangement is between NPCI International and Lyra. And we are very excited about the possibilities, and we are looking forward to, making the most out of this and help our travelers transact seamlessly when they visit France.
Right. So you said that this will begin from the Eiffel Tower. When does this come into effect, and when will users be able to use UPI in other parts of France as well?
So today, as of now, what we have achieved is we have achieved the connectivity between the two, platforms, that is UPI in India and Lyra's core platform in France. Now we are going to work with Lyra to bring merchants, including Eiffel Tower, on board, and we'll start with Eiffel Tower, and and then after Eiffel Tower is onboarded, we are going to work on onboarding other significant merchants, the marquee ones, which are of relevance to travelers from India, and these would include, the popular tourist sites, the shopping destinations, and that's what we are going to do. And majority of tourism from India currently is concentrated in Paris. We all know it's the most visited city in the world. So we are going to be focusing on that, but organically we'll expand to other relevant corridors as well within France.
Right. Give us a sense of the number of countries where UPI is available right now.
But when it comes to UPI, there are two key things that we are looking at in terms of the broad strategy. The first is the infrastructure build. The other is the interoperability build. We all know, UPI has achieved great scale in India. We are doing about 9.4 billion transactions a month. Now, using the same infrastructure that is powering the UPI in India, we are working with other, developing countries to help them create their own sovereign payment ecosystem. So that's one. The other is interoperability part, which is about connecting UPI in India with other similar ecosystems. So we are working in both the areas. And when it comes to the first area, which is infrastructure build, I think we are in discussion with many countries where there is high cash displacement, where the government is serious about driving their own national agenda, like government is doing in India. So we are engaged with a lot of countries from the developing world. So that's one. The other is when it comes to interoperability, we have identified markets that are of relevance to India, which means that where there is significant flow from India to these markets, for example, the markets in Gulf, markets in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and North America, and of course Europe. So we are looking at connecting with those ecosystems to be able to deliver a good user experience when travelers from India go to those markets. In terms of currently live for UPI, we are live in markets of UAE, Singapore, and Bhutan, and there are many in pipeline which will start materializing in next 3 to 12 months.
Right. Could you give us some new geographies where you're talking with partners for?
So, close to in the region, I think we are, discussing what are the important, tourist destinations if we look at in the region. I think Thailand is very important. Sri Lanka is very important. Mauritius is very important. Nepal is very important. So we are in discussion with, relevant players in these markets. And, in times to come, you will start unfolding of acceptance of UPI powered apps in these markets as well as in other important markets where Indians travel.
Right. Now, you recently said in the month of June that UPI is currently processing 40% of global real-time payments. How do you expect this to go up in FY24?
I think that's we all are seeing the way UPI is growing on a month-on-month basis. And there are two important things that are happening. One is the user adoption is increasing. So then we are gaining, horizontally more consumers on the platform. And then we are adding new use cases. So we're gaining vertically also on the platform. And a multiplier of these two, will create a lot of adoption and scale in times to come as well. And UPI will continue to play a very, very important role in driving economic activity in India, supporting financial inclusion, displacing cash, and also enabling fintech to create solutions on top of it.
Right. Could you give us a sense of how many transactions are taking place globally using UPI? How many Indian tourists are using this? What is the level of remittances? So
right now we are live in three markets, as I said, and we are seeing a good traction. But given we are starting now, so it's building up pretty in a very healthy manner. And I will not be able to diverge the number, but I'm saying it's very inspiring, it's very exciting. And every time we read from the consumers in social media, when they see UPI or a rupee brand mark in a market that they travel, it's very inspiring for us, and we will continue to invest in this area to be able to create a larger network so that more and more Indians from India, when they travel, they are able to use their most preferred payment method from India.
Right. My final question, what is the larger commercial benefit that NPCI is getting out of going live in other countries, having partnerships in other nations where there is a huge outflow, where there's a huge presence of Indian tourists?
So I think we are not looking at it purely from a commercial point of view. We are looking at, creating another use case for our users from India, because UPI is pride of the nation. Globally, everybody is talking about the DPI, digital public infrastructure that India has created, and that includes, the identity layer, the payment layer, which is UPI, and then the, data exchange layer, which is coming in form of, ONDC, DigiLocker, and other things. So I think globally, if you look at it, India's development model is being talked about, and more people want to replicate it. So I think UPI is the pride of the nation. And for us, the biggest driver is to be able to bring smile on faces of the 1.4 billion and people, especially when they travel outside, when they are going to be able to transact using UPI. I think that is going to give us a deep satisfaction, and that is when we can say a job well done. So I'm again saying commercials are not the big drivers here. It's about, helping Indians transact with confidence and pride when they travel overseas.
All right. And one more question. You said that you cannot give us the level of remittances on the number of transactions taking place abroad using UPI, but could you at least give us the geography of the country where the usage of UPI by Indian tourists is the highest?
So I think, we are the largest, inbound tourism supply for UAE as a market. And of course, the flows are significantly important for them as, inbound markets. So I think we have good traction there. When you're talking of remittance, which is personal payments between two individuals, we have only gone live in Singapore. And we have 6 pilot banks in India and 2 entities from Singapore who are participating in this pilot. And we are looking at, broad basing that as well. So there are discussions going on with other banks in India to participate in that personal P2P remittance corridor that we have created between India and Singapore. And it's creating a lot of, within this limited pilot group, we are seeing a great amount of transaction and activity, and we are seeing a weekly kind of growth, and we are very excited about it. So we are getting more and more people to participate as banks here in India as well as on Singapore side. So that's very exciting. And not only that, given the excitement that it has created, we are in active discussions with many other countries who are of importance for remittances to India. We get about $100 billion a month, a year. In 12 months, we get about $100 billion. And there are very, very important markets. And these are markets in GCC, North America. So we are talking to, players there to be able to create similar integrations for people to be able to send money to India on a real-time basis.
All right, Ritesh, we've run out of time, but thanks once again for joining us on Global Eye, telling us about your plans to take UPI global to more countries where there is a large presence of Indian origin people and also a large number of Indian tourists. Thanks once again for being with us. That's all we have for you on this edition of Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.